The sleek hull of the Aegis Vanguard cut through the cosmic void like a silver needle threading through black velvet, against the infinite darkness. The starship's approach vector aligned with a sphere of impossible blue and white, a world wrapped in crystalline ice that caught and refracted the distant starlight into 1,000 dancing prisms. Cryon 9 hung suspended in space, deceptively serene, its surface an unbroken expanse of cobalt frost interrupted only by the occasional burst of turquoise where geysers broke through the frozen crust. Inside the observation deck, human cadet Mara Ellison pressed her face against the transparent aluminum viewport, her breath fogging the surface as she recorded her observations into a palm-sized hollow journal. The device projected a shimmering interface before her, capturing both her voice and the wonder painted across her features. Personal log. Cadet Ellison, Day 0 of the Cryon 9 survival exercise, she began, her voice carrying the unmistakable excitement of someone witnessing their first truly alien world. Initial atmospheric readings show surface temperatures averaging negative 170 degrees Celsius. The ice sheet appears to be approximately 3 kilometers thick in most regions, with sporadic thermal anomalies suggesting active cryovolcanism beneath. A harsh laugh interrupted her recording. Mara turned to find 3 Varkali cadets lounging against the bulkhead, their crystalline skin catching and refracting the observation deck's lighting into rainbow patterns. The tallest of them, a being whose faceted features formed sharp angles that might have been a smirk, stepped forward. Cryovolcanism, the Varkali repeated, his voice carrying the distinctive harmonic overtones of his species. Listen to the little earthling, trying to sound impressive with her scientific terminology. Tell me, human, do you truly believe this frozen marble qualifies as one of your legendary death worlds? Mara paused her recording, studying the alien cadet with curiosity rather than offense. She had grown accustomed to the dismissive attitudes of some non-human species during her first months at the Interspecies Training Academy. Earth's reputation as a death world, a planet so hostile that most galactic species considered it barely habitable, was often met with skepticism by those who had never experienced its extremes. I simply observe what the data suggests, Mara replied evenly. Every world has its own forms of danger. Dismissing them because they don't match our preconceptions seems unwise. The Varkali's crystalline features shifted, creating new patterns of light. Servak is my designation, he said, as though granting her a favor. And I have survived the acid storms of Melkor Prime and the gravity wells of the Deneb system. This ball of ice hardly seems worthy of concern. Before Mara could respond, the ship's internal communication system crackled to life. All cadets assigned to Surface Team 7, report to Deployment Bay 3. Repeat, Surface Team 7 to Deployment Bay 3. Gear check in 15 minutes. Mara secured her hollow journal and moved toward the exit, pausing only to glance back at Servak. I suppose we'll find out together whether Cryon 9 earns its classification, she said, then added with a slight smile, though in my experience, it's usually the peaceful-looking worlds that surprise you most. The deployment bay buzzed with activity as dozens of cadets from various species prepared for descent. Mara made her way to her assigned locker, running through her mental checklist as she examined each piece of equipment. The standard-issue environmental suit was designed to accommodate multiple species, its adaptive fibers adjusting to her human physiology as she pulled it on, but it was the additional items she had brought, carefully selected based on her study of Earth's own polar regions, that she paid special attention to. From a sealed case, she withdrew a set of tools that would have been familiar to any Arctic explorer from Earth's past. A modified ice axe with a monomolecular edge, capable of cutting through even the densest ice formations. A collection of self-heating pitons that could create temporary anchor points in unstable surfaces. And most importantly, a thermal blanket woven with fibers that could rapidly expand and contract, creating pockets of insulation or acting as an emergency shelter. Cadet Ellison, the gruff voice belonged to Lieutenant Jovic, a Thurian whose bear-like appearance belied a sharp, tactical mind. His species had evolved on a world of eternal storms, and his approach to survival training reflected that harsh origin. "I see you've brought some non-standard equipment. Items from Earth's polar exploration history." "Sir," Mara replied, meeting his 4 eyes directly. "My great-great-grandmother used similar tools during the Mars polar expeditions. I've updated them with modern materials, but the basic principles remain sound." Jovik's muzzle twitched in what might have been approval. "Initiative is good. Cadet. But remember, surviving isn't about the tools you carry. It's about understanding the environment and working with it, not against it. Creon 9 has been a training ground for the Academy for 50 standard years. In that time, it has claimed 43 lives from 14 different species. Respect it, or join that number." As Jovik moved on to inspect other cadets, Mara noticed Servak and his companions at a nearby station. The Varkali were checking their equipment with casual efficiency, their crystalline bodies requiring minimal protection beyond basic atmospheric support. Their natural silicon-based biology made them resistant to extreme temperatures, a fact they rarely let other species forget. The deployment sequence began with a subtle shift in the bay's artificial gravity. Mara felt her stomach lurch as the Aegis Vanguard's inertial dampeners adjusted for atmospheric entry. Through the bay's transparency field, she could see Creon 9 rising to meet them, its surface features becoming more distinct with each passing moment. What had appeared smooth from orbit revealed itself to be a landscape of incredible complexity. Pressure ridges rose like frozen waves, some reaching heights of several hundred meters. Between them, valleys filled with what looked like snow, but which Mara's heads-up display identified as frozen nitrogen and methane. Most striking were the turquoise patches she had noted earlier, circular formations where some form of heated material had broken through the ice before freezing in place. "Deployment in T-2 minutes," the ship's AI announced. "Surface conditions are within acceptable parameters. Wind speed, 47 kilometers per hour. Temperature, negative 168 degrees Celsius. Seismic activity, minimal." Mara frowned at that last reading. The briefing materials had mentioned Creon 9's unusual geothermal activity, but minimal seemed to contradict the evidence of cryovolcanism she could see scarring the surface. She made a mental note to investigate once they were groundside. The landing was surprisingly gentle. The deployment craft's landing struts compressed slightly as they touched down on what appeared to be a stable ice shelf. Through the viewports, Mara could see a landscape that seemed to stretch forever, an endless expanse of blue-white ice beneath a star-filled sky. Creon 9's thin atmosphere meant that even during its long day cycle, the stars remained visible, creating an otherworldly twilight effect. "Surface Team 7, you are clear for disembarkation," Lieutenant Jovik announced. "Remember your training. Stay within communication range. Watch for crevasses and unstable ice. And whatever you do, avoid the turquoise zones until we can determine their stability." The airlock cycled, and Mara stepped onto an alien world for the first time in her life. Even through her suit's environmental controls, she could feel the cold, a deep, penetrating chill that seemed to seep through every layer of protection. Her boots crunched on the surface, which her suit's sensors identified as water ice mixed with frozen carbon dioxide. Around her, the other cadets were spreading out, some already beginning to set up the temporary shelters that would serve as their base camp for the 5-day exercise. Mara noticed Servak and his group moving with confident strides toward a nearby ridge, apparently intent on scouting the surrounding area. She was about to join the shelter construction when her suit's sensors detected something unusual, a slight vibration through the ice, so faint that it barely registered on her equipment. But Mara had spent months studying seismic data from Earth's polar regions, and she recognized the pattern immediately. The slow, rhythmic pulse of moving fluid deep beneath the surface. "Lieutenant Jovik," she called over the team communication channel, "I'm detecting subsurface fluid movement approximately 2 kilometers down. The pattern suggests active cryovolcanism, possibly a network of channels carrying liquid water or ammonia. There was a pause before Jovic responded. Noted. Cadet Ellison. Continue monitoring but maintain focus on immediate camp setup. We'll investigate anomalies once we're established. As Mara moved to comply, she noticed Servak had stopped his advance toward the ridge. The Varkali was standing perfectly still, his crystalline form catching the light from Creon 9's distant sun. Even from 50 meters away, she could see the way his body language had shifted from casual confidence to alert wariness. Servak, report. Jovic's voice crackled over the comm. The ice here, the Varkali began, then paused. It's singing, sir. My species can detect harmonic vibrations through our crystalline matrix. The ice is resonating with something deep below. Before anyone could respond, the first tremor hit. It wasn't violent, more like a long, slow exhalation from the planet itself. But it was enough to send several cadets stumbling. And Mara watched in fascination as a series of cracks appeared in the ice near Servak's position, spreading outward in a spiderweb pattern. Then came the sound, a deep, rumbling roar that seemed to rise from the very core of Creon 9. It was unlike anything in Mara's experience, a sound that bypassed the ears and resonated directly in the chest cavity. Several cadets cried out in alarm, and she saw two of them, a pair of Altarians, actually take several steps back toward the landing craft. In the brief moment of panic that followed, as cadets called out to each other and Lieutenant Jovic barked orders for everyone to hold position, Mara found herself oddly calm. She had heard recordings of similar sounds from Earth's ice sheets, the groaning and cracking of massive glaciers as they shifted and moved. But this was different, deeper, more primal, carrying undertones that suggested vast spaces and enormous pressures. You guys have ice volcanoes too? She asked over the general comm channel, her voice carrying a mixture of wonder and academic interest that cut through the chaos. The question seemed to snap everyone back to focus. Jovic's response carried a note of grudging approval. Explain. Cadet Ellison. Cryovolcanism, sir, Mara said, moving carefully toward Servak's position while keeping one eye on her sensor readings. On Earth, we have several moons in our solar system that exhibit similar activity. Enceladus, Europa. They have subsurface oceans kept liquid by tidal heating. The pressure builds up until it finds a weakness in the ice shell, then erupts as a mixture of water, ammonia, and other compounds. The sound we just heard, that's the acoustic signature of a massive volume of fluid moving through constrained spaces. She reached Servak, who was still standing motionless near the expanding crack pattern. Up close, she could see that the Varkali's crystalline skin was vibrating at a frequency just barely visible to human eyes, creating an almost hypnotic play of light and shadow. Can you tell what's down there? She asked quietly, not wanting to break his concentration. Servak's faceted eyes focused on her, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was no trace of arrogance in his expression. Water, he said simply. Vast amounts of it. Moving under pressure I can barely comprehend. And something else. Heat signatures that shouldn't exist on a world this cold. Lieutenant Jovic had approached during their exchange, his four eyes scanning the crack patterns with professional interest. Cadets, gather round, he commanded. It seems our training exercise has become more interesting than anticipated. Cadet Ellison, based on your knowledge of similar phenomena, what should we expect? Mara took a breath, organizing her thoughts. Around her, the other cadets formed a loose circle, their various species representing a cross-section of galactic diversity. She could see fear in some faces, curiosity in others, and in Servak's crystalline features, something that might have been respect. If Creon 9 follows patterns similar to what we've observed elsewhere, she began, then we're standing on a shell of ice that could be anywhere from 1 to 2 kilometers thick. Beneath that is likely an ocean of liquid water. kept from freezing by a combination of pressure, salinity, and possibly radioactive decay in the planet's core. The cryovolcanoes act as pressure release valves. When the buildup becomes too great, they erupt, sending plumes of water and dissolved minerals up through the ice. "How dangerous are these eruptions?" asked one of the Altarian cadets, still eyeing the landing craft. "That depends on proximity and scale," Mara admitted. "A small vent might produce nothing more than a gentle upwelling of slush, but a major eruption could send material kilometers into the air, flash freezing in the atmosphere and falling back as a lethal rain of ice needles. The immediate danger zone would be flooded with superheated water that would freeze almost instantly on contact with the surface, potentially trapping anyone caught in its path." Jovic nodded slowly. "Under normal circumstances, I would order an immediate evacuation pending a full geological survey. However," he paused, his predator's eyes scanning the group, "the Academy placed us here specifically because Cryon 9 teaches a valuable lesson. Any of you want to guess what that might be?" It was Servac who answered, his harmonic voice carrying a new note of understanding. "That the universe doesn't care about our preconceptions. That danger can come from any source, at any time, and survival depends on adaptation and knowledge rather than strength or technology." "Close enough," Jovic agreed. "The mission parameters remain unchanged. We have 5 days to complete our survival exercise, but now we have an additional objective, mapping and understanding the cryovolcanic activity in this region. Teams of 4, mixed species mandatory. Cadet Ellison, you'll lead Team 1 with Servac and 2 others of your choosing. Your Earth knowledge might keep us all alive." As the cadets began organizing themselves, Mara felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. She had studied cryovolcanism extensively, but academic knowledge and practical experience were very different things. Still, as she looked out across the frozen landscape of Cryon 9, she felt the same thrill of discovery that had driven her ancestors to explore Earth's most hostile environments. The team spent the remainder of the day establishing a secure base camp, with Mara's team taking point on identifying safe zones based on ice thickness and stability. Using a combination of her Earth-based knowledge and Servac's ability to sense vibrations through the ice, they marked out an area that seemed relatively stable, though everyone understood that relative was the operative word. As Cryon 9's sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, a process that would take nearly 30 standard hours given the planet's rotation, the base camp took shape. The shelters were designed to withstand extreme conditions, their adaptive materials providing insulation and structural integrity. But Mara insisted on additional precautions, showing the other cadets how to build ice walls that would deflect wind and provide extra protection against any potential eruptions. "Your ancestors truly explored environments like this with primitive technology?" Servac asked as they worked side by side, cutting blocks from the ice with fusion tools. "They did," Mara confirmed, pausing to catch her breath. Even with the suit's assistance, the work was exhausting. No energy shields, no adaptive materials, just layers of animal fur and an understanding of how to work with the environment rather than against it. They learned that in places like this, the landscape itself could be both enemy and ally. "Show me," Servac said simply. Over the next hour, Mara demonstrated techniques that had been passed down through her family for generations, updated for modern equipment but rooted in ancient wisdom. She showed him how to read the patterns in the ice, identifying stress fractures and potential collapse zones. She explained the importance of multiple escape routes from any position and how to use the planet's own features as natural shelters. As they worked, other cadets began to gather, watching and learning. Even Lieutenant Jovic observed from a distance, his expression unreadable but his attention focused. The cultural exchange that the Academy had hoped to foster was happening organically, driven by necessity and mutual respect. The first night on Cryon 9 revealed another of the planet's wonders. As darkness fell, or what passed for darkness under the star-filled sky, the ice itself began to glow. Faint at first, then growing stronger. A blue-green luminescence spread across the landscape in waves and spirals. Bioluminescent organisms in the ice, Mara breathed, her face pressed against the shelter's observation window. They must be photosynthetic, storing energy during the day and releasing it at night. But how do they survive in solid ice? Life finds a way, Servak quoted, surprising her. A human philosopher, I believe. Darwin. Close enough, Mara smiled. Though I think you're mixing up your references. But the principle holds. Life adapts to whatever conditions it finds. These organisms must have evolved when Creon 9 was warmer, then adapted as the planet froze. The display was hauntingly beautiful, transforming the hostile landscape into something from a dream. The patterns of light seemed to follow the subsurface water channels, creating a living map of the planet's hidden hydrological system. Mara made detailed recordings, her scientific mind racing with possibilities even as her human soul marveled at the beauty. The peace was shattered near midnight, or what their chronometers indicated as midnight in the absence of a true day-night cycle. A massive tremor, far stronger than the first, shook the entire camp. Mara was thrown from her bunk, landing hard on the shelter floor as alarms began blaring. All teams, emergency protocols. Jovik's voice cut through the chaos. Suit up and prepare for immediate evacuation if necessary. Mara struggled into her environmental suit, her fingers fumbling with the seals as aftershocks continued to ripple through the ice. Through the shelter's transparent walls, she could see cracks spreading across the surface, outlined in brilliant bioluminescent blue as the organisms reacted to the disturbance. Outside, the scene was one of controlled chaos. Cadets emerged from their shelters, some more prepared than others. The Altarians were already at the landing craft, clearly ready to leave at the first opportunity. But Mara's attention was drawn to the horizon, where something unprecedented was happening. A column of light rose into the sky, brilliant white tinged with blue and green. It climbed higher and higher, spreading out in a fountain of luminous particles that began to drift back toward the surface like frozen fireworks. The display was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying, a reminder of the enormous forces at work beneath their feet. That's 2 kilometers away, Servak reported, his crystalline form pulsing with reflected light. I can feel the harmonics. It's a major eruption, possibly the largest this region has seen in decades. Teams 1 and 3, with me, Jovik commanded. We're going to investigate. The rest of you, maintain camp security and be ready to evacuate if conditions deteriorate. The journey across the ice toward the eruption site was treacherous. The tremors had created new crevasses and shifted existing ice formations, turning what had been relatively stable terrain into an obstacle course. Mara took point, using her ice axe to test each step, while Servak used his vibrational sensitivity to warn of unstable areas. As they drew closer to the eruption site, the temperature readings on their suits began to spike. The ice beneath their feet showed signs of recent melting and refreezing, creating a surface of glass-smooth ripples that reflected their lights in dizzying patterns. The air itself seemed to shimmer with residual heat, though at these temperatures, heat was a relative term. They crested a pressure ridge and stopped in collective awe. Before them lay a transformed landscape. What had been a relatively flat ice field was now a collection of towering spires and frozen waterfalls, created when the erupting cryovolcano had sent thousands of tons of liquid water into the frigid atmosphere. The water had frozen almost instantly, creating structures that defied easy description, part sculpture, part geology, all alien. At the center of it all was the vent itself, still active though much reduced from its initial violence. Water bubbled up from a hole perhaps 20 meters across, steaming in the cold air before freezing into new additions to the growing ice structures. The entire area glowed with bioluminescence, the organisms in the water creating a natural light show that pulsed and swirled with the currents. "It's beautiful," someone whispered, one of the Altarian cadets who had been so eager to leave earlier. "Beautiful and deadly," Jovic reminded them. "This is what we're dealing with. Cadets. Forces that can reshape the landscape in minutes. Cadet Ellison, your assessment?" Mara was already taking readings, her scientific training overriding her sense of wonder. The water temperature at the vent is approximately -20 degrees Celsius, warm by local standards. High salinity and ammonia content are keeping it liquid. The eruption pattern suggests a pressurized reservoir that's been building for years, possibly decades. This won't be the last eruption. "Can you predict where the next one will occur?" Jovic asked. Mara exchanged glances with Servac. "Possibly, if we can map the subsurface channels and identify pressure buildup points. Servac's abilities combined with our sensors might give us enough warning to avoid the danger zones." "Then that's your mission for the next 3 days," Jovic decided. "Map the cryovolcanic system in this region. Identify safe zones and evacuation routes. The rest of us will support your efforts and continue with the standard survival exercises. This is no longer just a training mission, it's a real survey expedition." The work that followed was exhausting but exhilarating. Mara and Servac developed a system where he would sense the deep vibrations while she correlated them with surface features and her knowledge of terrestrial cryovolcanism. They identified 3 more potential eruption sites, marking them with beacon transmitters that would alert the camp to any significant activity. On the second night, their predictions were put to the test. One of the marked sites began showing increased activity, rising temperatures, intensifying vibrations, and a distinctive pattern of ice fractures that Mara recognized from her studies. They evacuated the area just 20 minutes before a spectacular eruption that sent a plume of water and ice 500 meters into the air. The other cadets watched from a safe distance, no longer dismissive of the danger or the beauty of Crayon 9. The eruption lasted nearly an hour, creating another forest of iced spires that glowed with internal light. As they observed, Mara explained the mechanics of what they were turning the terrifying event into a learning experience. "Each eruption is unique," she told the assembled group. "The composition of the water, the pressure dynamics, the atmospheric conditions, they all combine to create different structures. On Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, we've observed similar formations through orbital imaging. But being here, seeing it happen in real time, it's beyond anything I imagined." Servac added his own observations, his harmonic voice carrying new notes of respect and wonder. "My people have a saying, the universe sings in frequencies we cannot always hear. I thought I understood what that meant, but Cryon 9 has taught me otherwise. This planet has its own song, its own rhythm. We must learn to hear it if we wish to survive." By the 3rd day, the camp had settled into a rhythm of its own. Teams rotated between mapping expeditions, shelter maintenance, and rest periods. The various species were working together more smoothly than ever before, united by shared danger and discovery. Even the Altarians, initially the most fearful, had become enthusiastic participants in the survey work. Mara found herself at the center of it all. Her Earth-based knowledge proving invaluable, but her leadership emerging from something deeper, a genuine love of discovery and a talent for bridging the gap between different ways of thinking. She spent hours with each species, learning how their unique abilities could contribute to understanding Creon 9's mysteries. The Varkali's crystalline resonance, the Altarian's electromagnetic sensitivity, the Thurian's ability to sense minute pressure changes, each species brought something unique to the table. Under Mara's coordination and Jovic's oversight, they were creating the most comprehensive survey of a cryovolcanic system ever attempted by Academy cadets. On the 4th day, they made a discovery that changed everything. While investigating a series of interconnected subsurface channels, Servac detected something unprecedented, a vast chamber of liquid water, maintained at a constant temperature by what appeared to be hydrothermal vents at the bottom of Creon 9's subsurface ocean. "It's an entire ecosystem," Mara reported to the assembled camp, her voice shaking with excitement. "The bioluminescent organisms we see on the surface are just the tip of the iceberg. There's a complete biosphere down there, powered by chemosynthesis around the thermal vents. Life not just surviving, but thriving in conditions that would kill most known organisms." The implications were staggering. Creon 9 wasn't just a training ground or a geological curiosity. It was a living world, harboring forms of life that had adapted to extremes beyond anything in the galactic database. The Academy would need to completely reassess the planet's status and protection protocols. That night, as they prepared for their final day on Creon 9, the planet seemed to respond to their discovery. The bioluminescent displays were more vibrant than ever, creating patterns that almost seemed intentional, as if the planet itself was acknowledging their presence. The ice sang with harmonic frequencies that Servak translated into hauntingly beautiful sounds, broadcast through the camp's communication system. "Tomorrow we leave," Jovic addressed the group. "But what we've discovered here will change how the Academy approaches worlds like this. You've all proven something important, that survival isn't about conquering hostile environments, but about understanding them. Cadet Ellison, Cadet Surovac, your cooperation has set an example I hope all of you will remember." But Creon 9 had one more lesson to teach them. The final day dawned clear and cold, with the morning sun casting long shadows across the ice. The cadets were breaking down the camp, preparing for extraction, when Servak suddenly stiffened, his crystalline form resonating with alarm. "Something's wrong," he said, his harmonic voice discordant with stress. "The deep frequencies have changed. There's a massive pressure buildup, bigger than anything we've detected. It's—" He never finished the sentence. The ice beneath their feet buckled and heaved, throwing everyone to the ground. In the distance, they could see a series of eruptions beginning, not one or two, but dozens, creating a curtain of ascending water and ice that stretched across the horizon. "The ice bridge!" someone shouted. During their explorations, they had identified a natural bridge of compressed ice that spanned a deep crevasse system, their most direct route back to the landing zone. Now that bridge was directly in the path of the expanding eruption field. "We have to cross before it destabilizes," Jovic commanded. "Move! Teams in sequence! Maintain spacing!" They ran across the frozen landscape, their suits-assisted movement systems pushed to maximum. Behind them, the eruptions continued to intensify, creating a thunderous roar that seemed to shake the very air. The ice beneath their feet cracked and shifted, requiring constant vigilance to avoid suddenly opening crevasses. They reached the ice bridge to find it already showing signs of stress. Fracture lines spiderwebbed across its surface, and Mara could see meltwater beginning to seep through from below. The bridge spanned nearly 100 meters across a chasm that dropped into darkness. Circumventing it would add hours to their journey. Hours they didn't have. "Single file," Jovic ordered. "Lightest first. Maintain 10-meter spacing. If it starts to go, activate your emergency thrusters and aim for solid ground." The crossing began smoothly enough. The lighter Altarians went first, their minimal weight barely stressing the already compromised structure. But as the heavier species began to cross, the situation deteriorated rapidly. A massive tremor shook the entire region, and with a sound like breaking thunder, a section of the bridge simply vanished, taking 2 cadets with it. Their emergency thrusters fired automatically, carrying them to safety, but the gap left behind was nearly 20 meters wide. Worse, Lieutenant Jovic, who had been coordinating the crossing from the middle of the bridge, was now stranded on a rapidly shrinking island of ice. "Continue to the landing zone," he ordered over comms. "That's a direct command." But Mara was already moving. Her mind raced through calculations, distance, weight tolerances, available equipment. The thermal blanket her ancestors had inspired her to bring suddenly had a new purpose. She pulled it from her pack, along with her gravity tether, and began fashioning an improvised bridge. "Serivak, I need you to anchor this side," she said, handing him one end of the reinforced tether. "Use your resonance to find the most stable point. Everyone else, link your tethers together. We need to extend the reach." "Cadet Ellison, I gave you an order." Jovic growled, but there was something like pride in his voice. "With respect, sir, no one gets left behind," Mara replied, testing the makeshift line. "That's a human thing. We're kind of stubborn about it. The thermal blanket, designed to expand and contract based on temperature differentials, reacted to the extreme cold by stiffening into a rigid sheet. Combined with the linked tethers, it created a precarious but functional zip line across the gap. Mara clipped herself to it and, without allowing herself time to think about the wisdom of her actions, launched herself across the chasm. The crossing took only seconds but felt like hours. Below her, the darkness seemed to reach up with icy fingers, and she could hear the rush of water far below as underground channels merged and diverged. She hit the opposite side hard, rolling to absorb the impact, and immediately began securing the line for Jovic's crossing. The lieutenant needed no encouragement. With surprising agility for his bulk, he clipped onto the line and began to traverse. He was halfway across when the island of ice he'd been standing on simply disappeared, collapsing into the chasm with a roar that sent vibrations through the remaining bridge structure. "The whole thing's going," Servak warned, his harmonic voice cutting through the chaos. "Move!" The rest of the crossing was a blur of motion and adrenaline. Cadets ran, jumped, and in some cases flew across the deteriorating bridge, each passage weakening it further. Mara and Jovic, having reached the far side, turned back to help pull others to safety as sections of ice fell away beneath their feet. The last cadet, ironically, it was Servak himself, made it across just as the entire bridge structure collapsed. They all stood at the edge of the newly formed chasm, breathing hard in their suits, watching as tons of ice tumbled into the darkness below. In the distance, the eruption field continued its spectacular display, fountains of light and ice creating new landscapes with every passing moment. "That," Jovic said after a long moment, "is why we train. Not to conquer or dominate, but to adapt, cooperate, and survive. Cadet Ellison, your actions saved lives today. All of you performed beyond expectations." The journey back to the landing zone was subdued but not somber. They moved as a unified group now, all pretensions and species barriers forgotten in the face of shared experience. When the Aegis Vanguard's shuttles appeared on the horizon, there was relief but also a strange reluctance. None of them wanted to leave Cryon 9 without fully understanding its mysteries. Back aboard the ship, as they departed Cryon 9's orbit, Mara found herself once again at the observation deck. This time, she wasn't alone. Servak stood beside her, along with several other cadets from various species. They watched the ice world recede, its surface still showing the scars of the massive eruption event they had witnessed. "You asked if we have ice volcanoes too," Servak said quietly. "The answer is no. My world is crystalline, static, predictable. I thought that made us superior, more evolved. But Cryon 9 taught me that there is profound strength in change, in adaptation, in the kind of dynamic existence your Deathworlds represent." Mara nodded, updating her holojournal with final observations. "Every world has its lessons. Earth taught us that life is tenacious, that it finds ways to thrive in the most hostile conditions. Cryon 9 reinforced that lesson but added something more, that beauty and danger often go hand in hand, and that understanding is more powerful than dominance." "Will you return?" Servak asked. "Someday," Mara said with certainty. "There's so much more to learn. The subsurface biosphere alone could revolutionize our understanding of extremophile evolution. But more than that." She paused, searching for words. Cryon 9 feels like a reminder that the universe still has wonders to show us, mysteries to solve. That's why we explore, isn't it? Not to conquer, but to understand. Lieutenant Jovic approached, his heavy footsteps recognizable even in the ship's artificial gravity. The Academy is already planning a full scientific expedition based on your discoveries. They want both of you as advisors. He paused, his 4 eyes focusing on them with unusual warmth. You've learned the most important lesson any explorer can learn. That true strength comes from respecting the universe's power while never losing your sense of wonder. That's what will keep you alive out there, in the dark, between the stars. As the Aegis Vanguard entered hyperspace, leaving Cryon 9 behind, Mara made her final journal entry for the mission. Personal log, Cadet Ellison. Day 5. Conclusion. Cryon 9 has changed us all. We came expecting a simple survival exercise and instead found a world that challenged our preconceptions and pushed us beyond our limits. The planet they laughed at as just another Deathworld proved to be a teacher, a wonder, and very nearly our grave. I think about fear and wonder, how they're 2 sides of the same coin. The eruptions that could have killed us were also impossibly beautiful. The harsh environment that tested our limits also showed us how much we could achieve together. Every Deathworld humanity has encountered has taught us something vital about survival, adaptation, and the incredible diversity of life in the universe. Servak asked me once if we ever truly master the worlds we explore. I think the answer is no, and that's as it should be. Mastery implies dominance, control. But what Cryon 9 taught us is that survival isn't about mastering our environment, but about understanding our place within it. We are not conquerors, but participants in a vast, complex, ever-changing cosmos. The ice volcanoes of Cryon 9 will continue to erupt long after we're gone, reshaping the landscape, feeding the hidden biosphere, creating new wonders for future explorers to discover. And somewhere out there are other Deathworlds, other challenges, other opportunities to learn and grow. That's the gift and curse of exploration. There's always another horizon, another mystery, another chance to be humbled and admired by the universe we inhabit. End journal entry, end mission log, but not, I think, end of story. Mara closed the hollow journal and stood with her fellow cadets, watching the stars streak by outside the observation port. Each of them had been changed by Cryon 9, marked by its harsh beauty and unforgiving lessons. They had learned that Deathworlds weren't about death at all. They were about life in its most determined, adaptable, and wondrous forms. In the vast cosmos, adaptation was indeed the ultimate form of strength. And as for whether they were ever truly masters of the worlds they explored, the question itself missed the point. They were students, all of them, learning from a universe that had infinite lessons to teach. The laughter about Deathworlds had faded, replaced by something far more valuable: respect, understanding, and an unquenchable curiosity about what other wonders awaited them among the stars. For in the end, that was the true spirit of exploration, not the arrogant certainty that they could conquer any challenge, but the humble recognition that every world, no matter how hostile, had something to teach those wise enough to listen. And in the glowing, erupting, ever-changing ice fields of Cryon 9, they had all learned to listen very carefully indeed.